everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Tracy Cook, and I'm the Online Media Manager for ModernAnalyst.com, the premier community for business analysts. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar entitled, Are BAs and PMs Needed on Agile Products? Today's featured speaker is Elizabeth Larson, PMP, CBAP, CSM, Co-Principal, and CEO of Watermark Learning. This webinar will last approximately 60 minutes, including the question and answer session at the end. Please be sure to submit your questions in advance using the questions feature on the GoToWebinar software. And now I'd like to introduce Elizabeth Larson. Elizabeth, please take it away.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. I'm really delighted. I have divided this presentation into 3 different sections. So first we'll talk about some common Agile myths. Then we'll talk about where do we, PMs and BAs, fit in an Agile environment. And I'm going to use Scrum as my examples because that's the set of methods and practices that I'm most familiar with. And finally, we'll talk about how can we provide maximum value as our organizations continue to adopt and grow Agile. So let's begin with section 1, Agile Myths and why they need to be debunked. Oh no, the Agile Manifesto. I suspect that some of you are thinking to yourselves, if one more presenter goes over the Agile Manifesto, I'm just going to tear my hair out and go running and never come back. So I'm not going to read it to you. I'm not going to read the 4 articles. What I do want to focus on are myths that have arisen, I think, due to a misinterpretation and a misunderstanding of these 4 articles, which to me make so much sense. There's the myth that, hey, we don't have to follow any kind of process. We're on an Agile team. Everybody can do their own thing. Then there's the common myth, hey, I'm on an Agile project, so I don't need to do any documenting. Or if I do any documentation, just a little bit. I'm on an Agile project, so it is the spirit of the law that counts, not the letter of the law. And hey, I'm on an Agile project. We don't do a lot of planning. We're worried about getting the job done quickly, which has led to the Lone Ranger developer. And I think that many of these and other myths have arisen because people kind of either forgot about or misinterpreted this very important part of the manifesto. And that is there's value in the items on the right after the words over. Those things are valuable. It's just that we value the stuff on the left more. We want to reward people for getting the job done and actually delivering something of value. There are, of course, the 12 supporting Agile principles. And no, I'm not going to read them, but I do want to go over 4 myths. Agile equals quick. No project management is needed. Agile teams must be co-located. No business analysis is needed. So these are just some common myths that have arisen. There are 3 more that I do want to go over. They have grown to mythic proportions. They refuse to die, and although I do not have a silver bullet, can't kill these, I at least want to expose them for what they are. The first has to do with leadership styles. We have a little cartoon here. We have 2 subordinates about to see their boss. And one says to the other, his idea of servant leadership is that we serve, he leads. Command and control. This is, I think, the most pervasive and I think the most destructive of all the Agile myths, and that is that traditional projects, the leadership style is command and control. That command and control is one and the same as in a non-agile, a traditional project. Command and control, of course, is that everything flows downhill. It's authoritative, decisions are made at the top, and they just come downhill. In other words, the team works for the project manager. I learned some pretty harsh lessons in my early days as a project manager years ago, decades ago. One of which was that command and control simply doesn't work. Oh yeah, we could get compliance, but we would never get that commitment. I had been a BA for over a decade at a company. When I was promoted, I'm using air quotes around the word promoted, to project manager. And my boss called me into his office and said, Elizabeth, oh, we have such a good opportunity for you. This is great new project. It's large, it's visible, good opportunity for you. Very important to the company. Go talk to Jerry. And Jerry was an executive vice president and he was the project sponsor. So I go in and he says, hey, Elizabeth, good to see you. Here's the project and it has to be done by, and he gave me a ridiculous date. I mean, there's no way we could have done it by that date. And I stammered and I stuttered and I said, but, Jerry. He said, Elizabeth, if you don't get the project done by this date, we are going to lose our largest account. It makes up about 30% of our business, and it will be all your fault. Gulp. So I'm back to the team. And I said, okay, sponsor wants it done by this date. It's got to be done by this date. Really command and control, flowing from Jerry through me to the team. And I don't remember how it ended up. I think I must have brought it in pretty much on time within budget, and certainly Jerry was very, very happy. And so I felt pretty good because I could bring my projects in on time within budget, telling the team, hey, we got to get it done by this date, and the team would get it done by a certain date. But as I looked around me in the organization, I saw that the project managers that were most highly respected and effective were not the ones that brought the projects in on time and within budget. And I sat down with a colleague and I said, kind of like, well, what's going on here? You know, I can do this and this person isn't doing it. Why are they getting promoted and I'm not? And this colleague of mine, very highly respected, said, I don't think that the most important thing is for us to get our projects in on time and within budget. He said, I view my job, I'm the chief roadblock remover. I'm the person who, when issues arise, I get them resolved and I just get out of the way and let the team do their work. In other words, servant leadership. And my point is that the concept of servant leadership is not new. It's been going on traditional projects for a very long time, and it's a good, solid project principle that really works. Command and control doesn't work, and it never has, and it should not be synonymous with a traditional project. The next myth has to do with changes. Somehow a myth arose that once we had our project plans completed, they were cast in concrete. That's not the case. It's never been the case. Back when I was first promoted, again, air quotes, promoted to project manager, my boss sent me to a project management class. And I don't remember much about the class. I remember nothing about the instructor. What I remember is one really important tip that has stood me in good stead my entire career, project management career. And he said, there will always be changes on a project. They may be large, they may be small, your projects may be large, they may be small, but there will always be changes. He said, so put 5% of the project total into your project plan just to research change requests, not to complete them, just to research them. Again, we're talking, this was decades and decades and decades ago. We have never gotten a project plan approved and not had changes. Well, more recently, this myth has kind of morphed into, well, yeah, we know on traditional projects there can be changes, but you have to go through this massive, burdensome cumbersome, rigorous change control process. And that's never been the case on every project I have ever worked on. Small changes, small process. Large changes, large process, or certainly larger process. And I wonder how many people who talk about this myth realize that on Agile, there is a change control process. We don't call it a change control process, but there certainly is a process for handling change. I happen to love it. I think it's brilliant. Putting the accountability back on the product owner as representative of the business, put the accountability back on the business. I love it, but it is a process. The third myth that I want to talk about perplexes me. I don't really understand it, but the myth goes something like this. We have a dichotomy. People are either on an Agile project or a waterfall project. Well, waterfall is one of the project life cycles. It's not the only one, but it is a life cycle. And of course, with waterfall, the thought is that you complete a phase of the project, get approval, and then you move on to the next phase of the project. And I think that's where this myth that on a traditional project, all the requirements are gotten, elicited upfront. That's never been true. That's a myth. It has never been true, not even on waterfall projects. I worked on a lot of waterfall projects, and we've had business analysis, gotten the requirements throughout the entire project. I worked in one organization where they thought about having business analysts just get all the requirements up front and then move on to other projects. And I think it wasn't on my project, fortunately, but on other projects in the organization, or they tried it, they piloted it, and it didn't work. Can't be done. So this dichotomy, you're either on an Agile project or a waterfall project, that in and of itself is a myth. And the fact that you get all your requirements up front, that is a myth. There are other project life cycles besides waterfall. More than 25 years ago, I worked on projects that were iterative and incremental. We did a lot of prototyping. They were not Agile. They were traditional, but they were not waterfall. Well, why do we care? Why is it important to kill these myths? I think there are a couple of reasons. And number one, when we set up people who have worked on traditional projects as pariahs, it's not good for the organization, it's not good for the teams, and it's not good for the individuals involved. When we start thinking, oh, you're a business analyst, you spend way too much time documenting and listing requirements, we don't want you on our project. Oh, you're a PM, you worked on traditional projects, your leadership style has been command and control, I don't think you'll ever fit into our team. I think that's destructive. I know of a couple of organizations that during their Agile transformation laid off all their BAs. They didn't need them anymore, didn't want them. And it was kind of sort of a disaster. It didn't work. We need BAs. We need PMs on our Agile projects. But where do they fit in? Well, if you're familiar with Scrum, and again, I want to use Scrum examples, we know that there are 3 roles on a Scrum team. There is the Scrum Master. They help the team deliver the product. There is the product owner. The product owner owns that product, and they own all the features of that product, and they own all the requirements of all the features of that product, as the name implies. And everyone else is part of the development team. So where do the BAs and the PMs fit in? I want to look at all the possibilities, and I want to start with the BA. Where does the BA fit in? During last month's webinar, the Modern Analyst webinars, I was giving it on trends in business analysis, and someone wrote into the chat room, what Elizabeth, what do you think about the BA as a Scrum Master? And I said, hang on, please join us next month because I'll be talking about it. Well, let's look at the BA as a Scrum Master. Again, the focus of the Scrum Master is to help the team deliver the product. So they remove all the impediments. They're called impediments, roadblocks, whatever you want to call them. They help resolve issues and clear the way for the team. They do the coaching as needed. They protect the Scrum practices. So when you have people in the organization, sponsors, whomever saying, hey, just don't do that daily meeting thing you guys do. Don't do it. We don't need it. Don't do that retrospective. You don't need a product review during every sprint. It's up to the Scrum Master to protect the team and use the practices that make sense for that team. But importantly, again, I can't emphasize enough that the focus is on delivering the product, not the product itself. So what do I think about the BA Scrum Master? I'm not jumping up and down about it. Certainly, there are BAs who can jump into that role. As a BA, I jumped into a project management role. I never felt in the 15 years I was project manager that it was a wonderful fit, but yeah, it can happen. Okay, there's one more thing that I hear a lot. I hear, what about facilitation? Scrum Master does a lot of facilitation. In general, BAs do a good job of facilitation. So isn't that enough reason to have the BA be the Scrum Master? And I gotta say that I think it's a different kind of facilitation. Having done both for a very long time, there is a difference facilitating team events, which is what the Scrum Master does, and facilitating stakeholder events. Oh, sure, there are a few facilitation techniques that overlap. You're resolving conflict, you have to set priorities, but it's different. And anyone who has facilitated a current state and as is process mapping session with 25 to 30 stakeholders, you know what I'm talking about. It's different. To me, it's certainly not a compelling enough reason to have the BA be the Scrum Master. So not jumping up and down, it can work, but not jumping up and down. How about the BA as product owner? Well, the focus of the product owner is the product. The focus of the BA is the product. So what does a PO do, a product owner, PO? They make business decisions. They prioritize the requirements, that is, order the user stories. They get other stakeholders together to look at and review the product increment, the features coming out of each sprint, and they answer all the product questions. So what about this? There's something that a BA can do. There are three important things that all product owners need. I call it, my own words, AAA rating. They have to be available because I'm telling you, during the heat of the battle, so to speak, of a sprint, there is so much going on. We cannot wait for the product owner to go talk to 25 other people to answer questions and resolve issues. That just simply doesn't work. They need the ability to answer the questions. Again, if someone asks the questions, we want an answer. We can't wait for them to find out. Oh, I'll get back to you and let you know what that is. And third, they need the authority to make those business decisions. Well, what about the BA? BAs certainly can be made to have the availability, and they certainly are, in my opinion, just uniquely capable. They have that ability. They are able to see things that other people don't see. They have that world view. They can connect the dots. They can look at impacts and dependencies. They are uniquely capable. They have the ability, but they do not have the authority. And that is where I have a problem with the BAs being a product owner. Having lived with decisions that were made by BAs acting as product owners without letting me in the business and the other people on our teams in the business know the decisions that we're making. We have lived with business rules and decisions that have just been a disaster. I don't like that at all. I think it's very important for product owners to be making product decisions. They need to make the decisions. The BAs have a really important role. They need to be the trusted advisors who help ensure that the decisions that the product owners are making are good decisions, that they're the right decisions. And if we're working on a project of any complexity at all, having both a product owner and a business analyst working together in partnership, I'm telling you, it is a thing of beauty. You need both. So, I'm not jumping up and down about the BA as Scrum Master. I'm not jumping up and down about the BA as product owner. So where do BAs fit in? Unless it's a very small project, I think they're part of the development team, either doing or consulting on these things. They are doing business analysis. Business analysis needs to be done. They can contribute a lot. When we think about things like helping the PO with the prioritization, because they see things that the PO may not see, refining the backlog, getting those high-level user stories, those requirements down to the detail that's needed to estimate and develop them. Acceptance criteria, there's just so much business analysis that's needed. I think that's where they belong. And I'm not alone. More and more organizations are realizing that having an Agile BA is a really great thing. This is from Indeed.com, by the way. It's just one snapshot, just a few of the jobs available. Okay, how about the project managers? Where do they fit in? It has been suggested by people with a lot of credibility, people whom I admire and respect and really have just decades of experience in Agile. I've heard them suggest that a really good place for the project manager to transition to is the product owner. When I first heard that, I think my jaw dropped down to my knee. Product owner, again, focuses on the product, makes product decisions. Do we really want people who've been PMs to be making product decisions? Of all the possibilities, this is my least favorite. I do not like this one at all. Now, can some project managers transition into the business? Well, yes, of course, but then they're really product owners and not project managers. And as a general rule, project managers focus on delivery, helping the team deliver the product. So what do I think about the PM as Scrum Master? This one I like. I like this possibility a lot, particularly for smaller projects. I think that it's a pretty easy transition because project managers who have used servant leadership, this is the stuff that they've done. They can become really familiar and up to speed in a fairly short time. All projects, regardless of how big or small they are, regardless of the methodology that is used, have these processes in common. We begin, we do some planning, formally or informally, we do the work, we check the work, and then we close the work either being a project, a phase, an iteration, whatever. All projects, we begin, we plan, we do, we check, and we close. The Agile, the Scrum processes have these, so I think it's an easy translation. Now, you could argue that some of these you might put in a different set of processes, but that's okay. This is work that has to be done, and project managers are used to initiating kinds of work, estimating kinds of work. And by the way, I need to say this, what I'm saying not is that project managers or that Scrum Masters have to do this work. They have to ensure that it gets done. So yeah, I don't want that confusion. It's not that the project manager would do this work. They have to make sure that it does get done. The initiating pieces, the planning pieces, the doing, the completing of each sprint, the checking, and the closing, reviewing the product and the process. So I think that it's a really good fit. For a small project, as I said, for large, complex projects, I think we need Agile project managers. I think that's where they fit in the best. And there are just a couple of things here that are listed on the do or consulted on these things that I want to call out. And the first is performance reporting. Now in Agile, we probably are not going to call it performance reporting, but think about a large project that has multiple Scrum teams, maybe in multiple locations. Scrum Masters are really, really busy during the sprint doing Scrum Master work, but someone needs to pull it all together. And I know there's a Scrum of Scrum. Someone, the function is that of a project manager to report back to the sponsor and executives how this big, large, complex project is doing. Now I'm going to put on my CEO sponsor hat on for a second and say that even in our organization, we're small. And the projects that we do are relatively small, certainly smaller than the projects I did when I was in other organizations. But I got to tell you, and we do have Scrum walls, but I am not going to go into a Scrum room and look at the wall and see the state of all the projects, but I need to know. I need to know because this is money that we're spending. I need to know how they're doing. I need to know, are we behind? I need to know what's going on. I need to help in ways that I can help. I've been called a samurai sponsor. I love that title. I'm very proud of it because I can work within the organization to make sure that the projects move forward and don't get derailed and other priorities don't come up. But I need to have the information without looking at the detail myself. The other thing that I want to point out has to do with handling contracts and contractors, the whole vendor supply side of things. It seems to me, again, because Scrum Masters are very, very busy, that someone dealing with the contracts, someone besides your purchasing people, but dealing with the contracts and onboarding contractors. And we could be talking about contractors, we could be talking about implementing vendor software, but it's a whole thing in and of itself. And paying invoices. So how do we know that these people on large projects that may be all over the place have actually done the work? I think it's really perfect for an Agile project manager. I work with a colleague, and that's his title, an Agile project manager. He works on the vendor side, helping organizations implement enterprise-wide software agilely. So he is an Agile project manager. So again, the whole vendor side of things, I think it's just perfect for PMs. And again, I'm not alone. There are more and more people looking for Agile project management jobs. Section 3. How can we provide maximum value as our organizations either adopt Agile, begin their Agile transformation, or grow their Agile practices? How about an Agile PMO? Sort of seems like a contradiction in terms, right? Well, I think that one way that both PMs and BAs can add value, a lot of value, is by helping organizations adopt Agile consistently throughout the organization. Some of our customers have even told us that they want to put an enterprise layer of governance, of oversight on their Agile transformation. And there are aspects of that that are perfect for both PMs and BAs. There have been several articles written about the Agile PMO. I really like this quote that a project management office that is engaged in and supportive of transitioning to Scrum can be a tremendous boon. And not just, I think, transitioning to Scrum, but growing the Agile practices. The Agile PMO, of course, cannot be command and control, but the most successful PMOs and centers of excellence that I've ever worked with have been more servant leaders, understanding that they are working for the teams and working for smooth transitions for the organization. And there are a lot of things. These are just a few of the many things that I think an Agile PMO can do. And the more I've read, the more I think it's a better fit for transitioning experienced PMs and BAs. When I think of all the possible roles that they can play, assuming that they understand Agile, being in the Agile PMO seems to me one of the best. Many organizations, as we know, want to adopt Agile without really understanding Agile. And without really understanding that Agile alone is not going to solve all their problems. Sure, having Agile projects will help ensure that we're building products the right way, but not that we're building the right products at all. It's not going to help ensure that we can sell something new, that we can support something new, that it's really solving a real business problem or meeting a real business need. And it doesn't ensure in any way that the culture of the business itself is agile enough to react nimbly to change. They may not know that project agility is dependent on business agility. Oh, we just want to do Agile. We hear we can get things done quickly. People seem to like it. Let's just do Agile. Well, no, there's more to it. I think people in an Agile PMO are in a really good position to help the organization understand the commitment that is needed, that they need to make, the stake that they have in making Agile successful. A commitment to the fact that there's probably going to be a rather major shift in the organizational culture, and that the organization is going to need to spend some money on things like dedicated resources, on software, automated tools, a tool chain to help support continuous delivery, on scaling Agile and figuring out the whole digital technologies and building digital trust. This is something that I believe the Agile PMO can do, and experienced PMs and BAs can help with this effort. I want us to think about, when we think about our careers, 3 pieces of advice for us as we think about us working in an Agile environment. The first is, and this applies to all projects, I think that we need to be trusted advisors. And I'd even kick it up a notch and say that we need to be strategic partners. And that means that we need to be strategic, we need to think strategically, and we need to develop strategic relationships with strategic decision makers. And that's going to help us. If we're part of an Agile PMO, even if there is no Agile PMO, we can help and advise the organization as they go through their Agile transformation. I think we shouldn't be worried too much about the titles that they give us. Maybe we're going to be Agile BAs or Agile project managers, and maybe not. I don't care what they call me. I've been called every manner of title since I started my career in IT and before. I mean, they can call me, hey, you, Elizabeth, just get the job done. That's fine. That's fine. We cannot be so concerned about our titles. We do need to know, for BAs, we need to know what business analysis is, and that all projects need business analysis, and that we can help in that respect. Same thing for PMs and project managers. Let's not worry about whether or not they call us a BA. And this is sort of off the wall, but I think it's really important. And I think it ties into the Agile transformation, that is the digital transformation, because I believe that that's where our industry is going. And so we better become really familiar with it and conversant in the digital world. Again, that's going to help us be better trusted advisors and help the organization. Well, to end, the title of this presentation was, Are BAs and PMs Needed on Agile Projects? And honestly, I don't know the answer to that question. I'm not sure. Maybe. But I think ultimately that's the wrong question to ask. I think the question that we need to ask, are business analysis and project management needed on Agile projects? And the answer to that one is a resounding yes. Okay, well, that ends the formal part of the presentation. Tracy, I'm going to hand it back to you for questions.
Thanks, Elizabeth, and that was a great presentation. We do have a lot of questions coming in, so just a reminder for those that are looking, you can type your questions into the question box, and I'll read them to our Elizabeth. Elizabeth, our first question is from Mayor, and they write, who writes the user stories?
That's a great question. I love it. Well, the role responsible and maybe accountable for the user stories is the product owner. I have absolutely no objection to the BA writing the user story as long as the product owner owns it. Okay, so it's fine. It really, you know, there are some things, and there's this one graph that I saw once dividing up, okay, this is BA task, this is product owner task. In the middle, here are some things that it really doesn't matter because we're not talking about the business decisions that have to be made. So I don't care who writes the user story as long as the product owner prioritizes them and takes accountability for it.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Our next question is coming from Joshua. He asks, who determines in the organization the degree of product agility?
Who in the organization determines product agility? Well, as far as the product being built flexibly enough to change, I'm going to make an assumption that that's what you mean by product agility, that we're building it with a lot of flexibility. And I mean, basically that has to be our, well, there are a couple of aspects to this, because I think that ultimately it's the business who has to ensure that that's being done, but many people in the business are not going to know the details enough. So there's got to be conversations back and forth between people on the development team and the product owner and the sponsor to make sure that there's enough flexibility built in. Again, I think a BA can play a big part in this because they understand if we build it a certain way, it's not going to have the flexibility that perhaps the business is going to need, so they can provide their advice on that as well.
Thanks, Elizabeth. We have a couple of questions coming in about the digital world. So the question is, can you explain a little bit more about what the digital world is and expand on the meaning of being conversant in it?
Okay. Oh boy. I mean, this, I'm laughing because this is a whole presentation in and of itself. Okay. I mean, it's a whole topic in and of itself. I was interviewed, by the way, by IABA's Focus. And if you want more information on that, it's in their thought leadership focus thing. So a lot of information. Okay. Bringing us into the digital world, to me, means helping the organization as they go through their digital transformation, which basically, excuse me, are all the changes, the myriad changes that an organization itself has to make end-to-end changes in order to take advantage of the digital technologies. And we're talking about technologies such as RPA, the robotics, and predictive analytics, the cognitive technologies, AI, etc. So the digital world is making use, well, the digital world is making use of those technologies. What an organization has to do is transform themselves to be able to take advantage of those technologies. And I think we as trusted advisors can help the organization. I think we need to help the organization figure out, well, what is the best approach for us? What makes the most sense for us? And we're talking mainly about strategic BAs here. But when I say be conversant in the digital world, so that's kind of like a general understanding of what we're talking about from an organization's perspective. But when I say be conversant, I think we need to understand things like predictive models. I think we need to understand things like how the models are created. I think we need to understand things like all the issues with the data, and so that the historical data and the new data coming in, that it's good data that machines can actually learn from and make decisions on. We need to understand these things. And so it's different from what we've ever done before. And even if you're like me and the word algorithm is terrifying to you, I mean, it just sends shivers of fear up and down my spine. Even so, we need to know what they are. And we need to know why certain algorithms. We need to understand the business decisions. I mean, there's just so much that can go wrong. And again, we need to be conversant so we can be more trusted advisors. That's making very long story, not very short, but shorter.
Thank you, Elizabeth. We do have a lot of questions here, so I'm going to jump into our next one. Yep. Rasa is asking, you've talked that BAs could be Scrum Master roles in Agile projects. Can BAs also be considered as POs if they have the authority to make decisions? But also, what about on the development team? Are BAs fitting in there?
Okay, I want to make sure that I understand it. Okay, so my interpretation of what you're saying is, as I said, BAs can be Scrum Masters. I'm not jumping up and down, but they can be. My question is, and it's a fundamental question, and I know, by the way, not everyone agrees with me on this. I think it's a contradiction in term. I'm going to go out on a limb because I know people will disagree. It's a contradiction in terms to say that a BA has the authority. And let me tell you why. If I go back to the definition of what a BA is, what business analysis is, it's defining, and I'm taking this out of our body of knowledge, it is defining the business need. That is the business problem to be solved. So we're defining that need, and then we are recommending solutions that solve the problem. We are recommending solutions that add value to stakeholders. So that is the definition of what we do, who we are. We recommend. We are trusted advisors. We are management consultants. We are not decision makers. So I think it's a contradiction in terms to say that BAs can ever have the authority to make business decisions. And if they are making business decisions, then they're not really BAs.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That was a great way to explain it. Our next question comes from Debbie, and Debbie asks, can you speak about program management versus project management across Scrum teams in different areas of business? And are these synonymous to you?
Are program management and project management across teams synonymous? No, not necessarily. I think they can be, but when I talked about a project manager going across teams was for a given project, not necessarily a program. Now, if there are program managers, they can certainly do that reporting that I talked about to executives, to the sponsor, and that's great. But a program manager spans individual projects. I at the time I was talking about individual but very large complex projects. So I think there is a difference, but there doesn't have to be, depending on what we're talking about here.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Our next question comes from Jacob. As a business analyst in a small tech company with a very little structure, what advice would you have to begin a structured environment?
Okay, that is another question that's making me think. So when you say a structured environment, do you mean an agile environment, or perhaps what's happening in your organization is that you are doing some things that they're calling agile, even though they're probably not agile? I think we need to remember that Scrum is a lightweight set of practices that require discipline to be successful. That's just definition of what Scrum is. Lightweight set of practices. So it would seem to me that getting people trained in Scrum, getting them coached in Scrum so that they really understand these practices, lightweight as they are, is going to be really important for an undisciplined environment.
Thank you. Oh, there's so many questions. Sorry, I'm just trying to.
That's okay. That's good. That's good.
Lee asked, can BAs be roadblock removers?
Sure. Absolutely, they can be roadblock removers. They can be Scrum Masters. Okay, let's think about the different kinds of roadblocks. The Scrum Master removes roadblocks relating to the delivery of the product. And that's one kind, but there are certainly roadblocks related to the product itself. And I think one of the many things that a BA does is absolutely resolve issues and get stakeholders going and in the same direction relating to product roadblocks. So I think it's really important to distinguish the project from the product. The team roadblocks versus requirements kinds of roadblocks. And yeah, I'm not sure that was the intention of your question, but I love your question, and I think that distinction is really important. Now, can a BA remove project roadblocks? Get the team going? Yes, but then they're really doing Scrum Master work. As I said, I have no objection to BAs transitioning to a Scrum Master if they have the skills. It's not BA work. At that point, it is not BA work. It's Scrum Master work.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Our next question comes from Denise. And this is a little tricky, but specifically, what does a BA add to an Agile project?
Okay, I think they add a lot if they do. Is that BA or business analysis? And I'm sort of asking that rhetorically.
Well, it comes under as BA. Denise, did you want to? We'll see. No response yet. Did you want me to move on to the next one then?
No, I'll answer it, even though I'm not quite sure.
Business analyst.
Okay, BAs specifically. BAs, okay, when I said let's not worry about titles, I kind of meant that. I mean, it could be someone else on the development team doing business analysis as long as business analysis is done. But the kind of work, first of all, is to, before we ever begin to define the business need, that has to be done. And business case, formal or informally, hey, is it worthwhile to the organization to pursue this? But things like a BA can really help the PO write the user stories, come up with the acceptance criteria, do the modeling by refining the backlog that is coming up with the detail. I mean, user stories in the beginning can be very, very high level, and I don't even mean just the epics. I mean, helping split the user stories. There's just so much that needs to be done. Does it have to be a BA? No, it does not have to be a BA, but that kind of work has to be done. And in general, my experience is that POs that are really business product owners are not very good at that. So yeah, I think BAs are absolutely needed again.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Well, business analysis is needed.
Our next question comes from Kathy, and she asks, what are your thoughts about a combination of product owner and BA role?
For the reasons I've stated before, I'm not jumping up and down about it. There are certain situations where it can work. So let's say I am a combination BA product owner. I could do a lot of the work, but I'm going to have to go back to the business. I can recommend a lot of things to the business. I can answer a lot of questions during the sprint. I can do all the things that I need to do as a product owner. I could write the user stories. I can come up with the acceptance criteria. I can do so much. But for business decisions, I'm really going to have to go back, take a little bit of time, and make sure that we have the right decisions. I can make some design decisions, that's okay. But basically, we're doing this for the customers who are going to be using our applications, and I don't know. I'm just not comfortable with that. But on a small project, well, I know it's common. Let me just say, I know it's common. I know it works in a lot of organizations. So if it's working in your organization, good. And I'm just afraid that after the fact, it's going to be like us when we designed our website, and we didn't even know half of the business decisions and business rules that were being made for us till we started using our website a lot. So it's really like after the fact that the problems are going to arise. But if it's working, hey, go ahead, keep doing it.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Our next question, can the BA be replaced by artificial intelligence in the upcoming years, or do you think it's a human role?
Oh, I love that question.
That could be a whole webinar.
It really could be. It really could be. Okay, so there's some people out there that say by the year, I think it's 2045, maybe it's 2049, I think it's 2045, that the smartest, most capable beings on this planet are going to be machines. Now, singularity. So maybe that's true, maybe it's not true. I'm going to say not in the immediate future, but in the fairly near future. Sadly, the answer is going to be yes. I say that reluctantly, but I think that yes. Yes, some BAs can be. Yikes.
Thank you. Yikes. Our next question comes from Debbie, and this is quite interesting. Questions that are asked to traditional PMs include, is the deliverable on time, on budget, with the right scope and quality? Now, what is the best set of questions for an Agile project manager to be asked?
Okay, it would help me to know asked by whom. Do we mean the sponsor? Or is that what we mean? Because is it the sponsor?
Thank you, Debbie. By sponsors and stakeholders on the business side.
Okay, so I would want to know, okay, because Agile's a little different. We are delivering, hopefully we're delivering features as we're going along. So what else is left to do? This is something I really, really want. How is this particular one coming along? How much money have we spent? How are we doing against this overall budget? In some organizations, you're still going to have an overall project budget. So how are we doing against that? How much more is going to be left? And what do we think is going to be accomplished within the next X amount of time? What can I promise my customers as far as the features are concerned? To me, the concept of on time at least is really kind of an old-fashioned, outdated concept in Agile. And we're still going to have budgets, but it's a different mindset. It really is.
Thank you. Craig now asked, who on the team should be responsible for vendor management?
Again, that's such a good question. And if I look at the team as being involved in developing the product increments, the product features, that's why I like to have someone outside of the team dealing with the vendor management. Now, if you don't have that, if I had to choose a role, it's kind of like, do I want to be shot by a firing squad or hanged? I don't want either one. But if I had to choose, I choose the Scrum Master. If I'm forced to choose, I think that is the best role. But I'd still rather, because there's just so much to do, I'd rather see another role. I'd rather see, on a large project where we're dealing with vendors, having an organizational project manager dealing with the vendor.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Our next question comes from Anna Maria. Do you have any recommendations for BAs working in outsourcing while the PO is from the client side?
Outsourcing. Okay, so the BA is working on outsourcing and the PO is from the client side. That all makes sense to me. And recommendations, I'm not sure I understand. Recommendations as it relates to Agile. I have lots of recommendations that don't necessarily pertain only to Agile. But again, that partnership, because we have several things going on here. We have, if we're outsourcing a part of the development, there is, I'm hoping, an Agile team that's still doing the work. We still need to do all the work that we would typically do. We need to have certain, it's because we are further away and they're part of a different organization, they're going to have to be more checking of things as they come in. It might be more complex, but we're still doing the same work, and the product owner still has to be involved with the people who are doing the work, because they still have to own those requirements, those user stories. So to me, it's still that partnership between the BA and the PO, and now we have a third part, and I don't know if there is like a person on the outsourcing part of this, that is there a BA or a PO? It wouldn't be a PO, but maybe a BA on their side as well. So it kind of depends how it's set up, but it's still like a partnership where we're doing the same things. We're just dealing with a vendor, an outside set of people.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I see by the time that I have just asked you your last question, so I'll just give you a moment to do a quick thank you. Excellent. So our last question, is a little more of a comment though, is what is business analysis if it is not data analysis?
Okay, another. I love the questions that I haven't really thought about before. Business analysis is a set of practices, and one of those practices is, one set of those practices is data analysis. But business analysis encompasses a whole lot more. It's data analysis, it's process analysis, it is people analysis. It's broader. It's analysis of the business problem to be solved. It could include root cause analysis when we're doing business cases. So it's beyond data analysis, although data analysis is one pretty big, important part, particularly as we get into the digital technologies, big, important part of what a BA does. So Oh, I just thought these were wonderful questions. I love the questions where I am challenged. So thank you very much for those. Thank you very much for joining me in this webinar. And I'll give it back to Tracy.
Thank you, Elizabeth. What a great webinar and such a great Q&A today. We'd like to thank everyone for attending today's Modern Analyst webinar. And I'd like to remind everyone that today's webinar, along with the slides, will be archived on the ModernAnalyst.com website within a few business days. And this concludes today's event. Thanks so much and have a great day.